Ladies and gentlemen, superheroes of the world, we are testing our new system, and I think everything's working. But I've got here today a guest that I've been meaning to have on the podcast for a minute now, mainly because I think you've just got one of the coolest jobs that I've ever encountered, and somebody who I've kind of gotten to deeply connect with, support, listen to, just kind of hear the back ends of. But at the same time, I have no knowledge of all the beautiful things that you are conducting, pun intended, because my good friend Adam Johnson is here. He is, or was, the conductor in residence at the OSM. I don't even know exactly what happens after that and what that looks like, but I know that you are basically the maestro behind some of the most beautiful symphonies I've ever heard. And not that you wrote them all, there's some of them are renditions of all of these different things, but I find it so beautiful that you have a skill that really is so collaborative and is so powerfully important and just such a beautiful, you are so, people are judging you as a conductor, but also on the work of so many other people. Mm-hmm. And there's such a beautiful symphony that comes out of that, but it can also go completely wrong. And so right before we press record, we were talking about how one of the first concerts you had done at one of these free concerts outside with the OSM was in Pierrefonds when they had flooding here in Montreal. And it was just kind of a drag because there was a lot of things going on a PR side and a bunch of stuff. So I want to know, what's the worst thing, what's the nightmare that keeps you up at night as a conductor? It's just is it the gong that goes off at the wrong time? What's the thing that you wake up startled and oh my God, what's keeping you up at night as a conductor?
I guess it's changed over time. But when I started the job, because I'd wanted to be a conductor for a long time, but it was one of these things where it's tough. It's a tough job to get experience at, right? And so then once I'd finally won my first professional job, which was with the Calgary Philharmonic about 7 years ago. It was awesome. I got the job, and then it was oh, damn, I hope I could do the job, right? Because you win an audition, but I didn't know what I was doing.
And it's still, you still have to step in front of the crowd the first time, and there's no way to practice that.
Yeah,
it's either you're in the game or you're completely out of the game.
Exactly. So, but I did have kind of all summer to prepare for my very first concert, and so stress was through the roof, but it went great. I had a lot of time to prepare. Second one went well. It was when I got to the third one that then I hadn't had the same lead time for preparation, and it was it was a concert where there was a whole bunch of moving parts. I had 4 singers. The charts, the scores were handwritten, so they were harder to read. There was so much going on, and so I'd been preparing right up until 5 minutes before showtime, and the librarian comes to my dressing room to take the music to put it out on stage on the music stand, and then I had to change really fast, and I get there to the backstage, and then I saw on the TV screens backstage that it was a really big setup for the stage, all the lights and the colors, and there's flowers everywhere, and the orchestra's out there, and it was a sold out concert, and suddenly it hit me I hadn't gotten mentally ready yet to go out and do this, and I had these speeches that were part of the show, and there was a guy going out to do the introduction to the whole thing, and he ended up saying the first couple lines of the speech I was supposed to do. And I had worked hard at memorizing this thing, but I'm oh no, I can't go out there and repeat what he just said.
Yeah.
So then I'm thinking, well, I got to start midway through my speech.
But that's way more difficult to do when you know the opening and you've memorized something.
Yeah, exactly. So I do the overture, which is the first piece of the concert. The whole time I see this mic, in the corner of my eye. I'm just dreading getting there to this thing and wondering what I'm going to say. And sure enough, I get to we finish the thing, and I turn to the audience, and the lights are super bright, and it just wiped my mind, and I couldn't start. And I was standing there with a total mind blank in front of the 2,000 people, and anyway, I eventually snapped out of it. But after that, my self-confidence just started spiraling, and then I thought, oh my God, I can't handle this. I can't, like, I'm on stage with the orchestra going through it, and I'm thinking, like, and I'm just losing the mental game totally. And then I'm thinking, I've still got, like, this is concert number 3 or whatever, and I've still got like 33 to go for this season, my first season, and I can't handle the job. It's you know, like when things are going bad, you make them way worse.
Of course, you're amplifying it in your own mind. Everything, the world is crumbling inside of you.
All I want to do was crawl under a rock, and here I am in front of a major professional orchestra with a couple thousand people in the crowd, and so that was kind of a nightmare scenario. But it was great that I had to face it, because I realized while I was on stage, like, I got to save this and I got to turn this around. And I'd been listening to Tony Robbins and reading Tony Robbins stuff for a long time, and I remember him at one point saying something like, whatever we're experiencing isn't real. It's just what we're focusing on and how we're using our physiology and the language we're using to describe it to ourselves. So it's like, okay, this isn't real. I'm just experiencing this because of what I'm doing. And so then I changed physiology, started changing my focus, and then it actually worked. Within like 3 minutes of me deciding to change what was going on, I felt totally different.
Change your state.
Yeah, and I ended up having the rest of the concert went great. But what I learned from that was a few things anyway, that I had to really prepare mentally to go out and take that time to. So I have a routine now before going on stage. Anyway, it was a really vivid example of
like that PTSD that comes with the job, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is and it's when you're trying to learn the ropes, it's a very public way to learn. So it was scary for a while, but now it's gotten to the point I've done enough concerts, and I know the stakes, know what's going on, and I was super pumped to have you out of the concert this past summer, right?
That was great, yeah.
But we were just talking about this before the podcast, but there was something like 10,000 people there. So, but
I was amazed.
A lot of people come out, but it's at this point it's like, well, there's people there. I have my job to do. I've got I know what my role is. I know what my role isn't, and just focus on what I got to do. So.
I appreciate the passion that I saw on display. Like, so I'd never been to any orchestra ever in my life before.
Hey, really?
Yes, that was my first ever orchestra concert. So, I don't have a lot to gauge on necessarily, but I've been to shows, and I have an idea of what it looks like and all these different things. The first thing I would say is I was shocked at how many people were there. I was like, wow, like the local newspaper is doing a phenomenal job at rallying the troops, and is way more powerful than I thought. And I think it's because I live a little bit in a bubble, right? I don't interact with the mass population that actually is the population of Brossard for the most part. I'm interacting with millennials, and I'm interacting online on social media. I'm doing podcasts that have viewers that are listening to us live at any one moment. It's such a different world.
Yeah. And
so my world is, at the end of the day, we're two guys, and my brother here behind the scenes is running the operation at the moment. And realistically, I was like, wow, it's such a beautiful feeling to perform in front of so many people. And I wasn't performing. I was just like kind of putting myself in your position and wondering like, oh, what is it like to do this job?
Yeah.
And it was so fascinating for me to kind of think about how many people had showed up.
Yeah.
How, and again, starting with your job is so dependent on everyone else. Because at the end of the day, like I could show up here and I could be ready. I could get all the equipment ready. Yes, I can prep certain things. There's all kinds of things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's so much that I'm in control of.
Yeah.
That directly let this podcast either be a sink or swim in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
I can't control what you're going to say, but realizing I can control the questions, I can control so many aspects of the output, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But in your line of work, you aren't controlling. In fact, you're playing 0 notes of music in a sense.
Yeah. It's a very weird job in that I'm a musician running the whole thing, but I don't make a sound.
You don't make a sound.
Yeah.
And that is such a mind fuck. Like that's because that's so wild. And then I was thinking about like the tradition of what it was like to truly get not only orchestras today to be in sync, but what it was like to like make that happen over time.
Yeah.
Like over the years, and this is centuries of centuries of practice and thought and song and kind of musical performance that you guys are also carrying out with so much tradition.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that hit me, which was so powerful, was how much of the music I knew.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I mean, you played like at one point it was this Russian thing from somewhere from Russia, and it was like I think it was a video game one, like it was like almost like a boss, like the bad guy boss video game thing.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't know what it's called, and surely you could refresh my memory on that. But the point is, you were playing music with the orchestra, and I don't know how much of it was tweaked one way or the other, or is a rendition that is kind of the exact version. I'm sure there's obviously some
Yeah,
input.
yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things to that. I think for sure, on one hand, people don't think that they know orchestras. Like you said, this is my first concert, and yet we actually hear orchestras every day,
All the time.
all the time. Anytime that movie is on or TV is on or whatever, like it's the ultimate soundtrack.
Exactly.
And it's really like we haven't found, a broader range of ways to be expressive or to communicate emotion in
Yes.
music than a symphony orchestra.
Yes.
Right. And the real thing is, like I was just watching what's the show on right now? Disney,
Imagineering?
No, the
Mandalorian.
Mandalorian.
Yeah.
That's right. So I was just watching that, and it's great, but the soundtrack blows.
Right?
It blows.
The soundtrack is just like, it's too cheesy. It's like you're trying to be too Star Wars.
Yeah, well, there's some, yes, but then there's also something in the quality of the sound. There's no way they're using a symphony orchestra. They're using a synthesizer.
Exactly. It sounds super digital.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound real. Like, it doesn't sound like what Hans Zimmer would deliver to me in Inception.
Right.
In some way, shape, or form.
Right,
Not to
right,
say,
right.
and I don't even know what Hans
And
Zimmer's process is necessarily, but it doesn't sound good.
An acoustic
Yeah.
instrument playing a sound that's recorded, and a symphony orchestra when you've got 100 musicians on stage. There's a range there that's possible for communication that's just like unsurpassed, right?
Agreed.
And so that's one of the reasons why orchestras are still relevant today after hundreds of years and so much change in technology.
Yeah,
And
we
so
still
the
can't
world
do
is changing so fast. We haven't beat a live symphony orchestra yet. And I get this a lot from people who come, say you go to the Maison Symphonique, and like, I don't know, have you been inside? Yeah.
I've never been inside.
See, and that's one thing that's unfortunate about the way it's set up in Montreal, is that it's kind of tucked away in Place des Arts. You don't really see it. People don't know how amazing it is. It's one of the best acoustic spaces in the world. And you go in there, and it's people are just blown away by the space itself. But then to hear a symphony orchestra, like I have yet to meet anyone who comes in and listens to an orchestra for the first time who isn't like, wow, this is amazing. But it's not part of our education. We're not exposed to it as kids anymore, and so we kind of,
it's a hidden force. It's literally a hidden force in all the things that we do. I think, like, for non-musicians, for people who like just go through everyday life, we don't realize the impact of sound on us.
Yeah.
And this year has been like the year where I've learned sound more than anything else.
Okay.
Like, it's like if I had to think about one digital skill that I'm like learning more and more and more of, it's like playing with Adobe Audition, learning how, okay, wait, this sounds like this, and then, oh wow, there's a little bit more of an echo in this way, or you know what I mean? Like, and I'm starting to realize those things. But then I'm starting to realize, it's the first time I ever lived in the city, I started to realize how much white noise there is outside all the time. Construction, there's that sound, there's a truck backing up going beep, beep, and all these things indicate something to us.
Yeah.
Right? They're an alert of some kind.
Yeah.
They're meant to evoke an emotion, ideally. Sometimes they're off, and it's like the whole show, The Mandalorian, is incredible visually.
Yeah.
But the first thing I noticed, I was like, the sound is just weird.
Yeah, it's
like,
not
it's just
the
like
same
it's
quality
just
as
not
everything
hitting
else.
it.
And so somebody undervalued what the sound, how important it is. They cut the budget on sound. And it's just like, no, but that's where
but that's the emotion.
We will buy soundtracks to a movie, but we will never buy just the picture.
Yep.
Right? We won't buy.
And we'll listen to the soundtrack 1,000 times over.
We'll listen to the soundtrack because that's the emotional content.
Agreed. It's talking about even thinking about movies from the perspective of like, turn on a scary movie and remove the soundtrack. Tell me how scary it is.
Yeah. Right.
No matter how good the visuals are.
Yeah.
And then think about what, like, even somebody like Spielberg had to do when Jaws, the mechanical shark, sucked, and he's like, oh, it doesn't look good on camera. What are we gonna do? They come up with the soundtrack.
Yeah.
They come out with the
imply the shark.
and I say that, and you know
Yeah.
what I'm evoking.
Yes, and so which reminds me of a second point is that you recognized a lot of the music from that concert.
Yes.
In part because it reminded you of something, but
Of
it's
something.
like
Yes.
so much of what we know in pop culture is based on, including Star Wars, by the way.
Absolutely.
John Williams inspired by Tchaikovsky and Dvorak, and actually Jaws is
Totally.
there's this is one of the most famous symphonies there is the New World Symphony, Dvorak Ninth Symphony, and the fourth movement starts. And it's exactly Jaws. Borrowed that from there. So it's like you have these genius composers of the last few hundred years that we still listen to this music because of just how amazing it is at communicating. And then composers today are inspired by it and they take part. So even if you've never sat down and listened to an actual symphony, it's part of our cultural baggage because of how prevalent it is.
But again, it's so unknown. I for me went through so much of life not thinking about all those different pieces. And so me coming into this space is the first time I've ever had full control over the way a space looks.
Okay.
It's the first time in my life at 30, I moved in at 30, but 31 years old, where I've had the full control of the way I wanted the space to be designed and look.
Yeah.
Meaning like all the art on the wall, the way that this thing shows up, the way that all these things work. This is the first time that I chose, the lighting is going to be like this, and this is going to go like that, and different elements. And so even like my brother turned off the TV fireplace, but the TV fireplace is super important for me because it makes the crackling sound that is it's such an important piece. But it's not just that. There's the light that goes around the TV. I put a little light that matches this LED light. All these little things impact me so much more than I thought. And the second I started becoming obsessed with them all, like every detail of sound, and then all of a sudden you run a podcast and you're like, oh wow, I hear the hallway way more than I thought. Or, oh man, when the toilet flushes, it takes much longer to flush and it has this like weird sharp sound. All these things are like, and
they're unaware of them, they get filtered out, but
completely filtered.
You start to pay attention.
But when you start paying attention, I've opened up my consciousness to a whole new world of thought.
Yeah.
And the same happened to me with essential oils, with the sense of smell. I wasn't really giving enough credit to smell. Right? It's like how much of McDonald's is the smell of McDonald's. Right?
Yeah, interesting.
And then you walk into a McDonald's and you hear that and the fries and the alerts that are going off and like all the sounds of that space are such a powerful piece. And there was one there's this one thing I'll reference, and Jordan, you can add this as a clip, when you're doing the clips later. There's this one YouTube channel, it's called Great Big Story. And they've started to record nature. They go outside and into different spaces. They've started to record nature from like 2002 until like, let's say 2016, 2018, or whatever it is. And they're seeing that nature's soundtrack is just getting muted. Like, so as we have extinction, we're talking about like, we think about, the koala's not gonna have trees to be on, right? We think about that, the physical existence of that koala, the physical existence of where the orangutans are going to be because of the slashing and burning of forests or whatever it is, right? We think about the very physical side of things, but we also don't think about what is the impact on sound, what is the impact on smell, what is the impact on the other senses that actually speak way deeper into my psyche than because particularly visually we're so stimulated. Right, we're constantly staring at screens. There's ads and things and flashing lights. We see how many ads physically with our eyes, but how many ads do we hear? And how much does all of that play into it? And I was just so fascinated. And so this one concert, I just got hit with all the emotion of your work, really, mixed with the work of many people who have written this music before you, of course, mixed with all the performers. And I was so amazed at that. And then the whole time I kept thinking, I know that I'm not hearing the mistakes, the certain people who are off here and there. And then I wondered how much you hear that. Right? Like how much how much are you like directing, because you're directing the pacing and certain pieces, and I would love to hear more about like what you're really thinking or going through when you're going through the process.
But
then how much are you going and looking at like a specific area or a person and saying like, hey, you're just a little bit off, but with your eyes you're communicating something like that. Like,
that's
would love to hear.
going on. That's going on constantly.
Right.
But so we typically have between one.
I slowed down on the third angle, by the way.
We have between 1 and depending up to 5 rehearsals before a concert. So the one you heard in the summer, we just had 1 rehearsal before that. And so then it's a really quick, like, we just got to make it work and make it work now. Now, they're professionals. Everybody shows up ready. And everybody can play the notes. Everybody's learned there. This is like,
they know the notes.
Top level. Yeah. So then my job is.
And what's the average, like, just to stop you real there, what's the average, like, how much time do you think the average person in that orchestra has played their instrument?
Oh.
How many years of experience on average? Like, everyone's like a 10-year veteran kind of thing, would you say?
Well, some people have been in the orchestra less than others, of course. I mean, there are people that have played in the orchestra for 40 years. There's some that are in their first year. But say somebody who's in their first year, and they're maybe in their like late 20s or early 30s.
They probably still played and started at 10.
They've been playing, well, earlier than that.
Even
if they're a string player, typically around 5 years old. So this is somebody that's already, if they're 20 years old, they've already got 15 years of experience on the instrument, right? And training, training every week
over and over and over again
with a
the
teacher.
Same little piece.
Well, or tons of them, but with like training with a mentor who's guiding you every week. Like, it's something that not the average person ever experiences, right? So it's a real like specialty in the specialization. You know? And then in order to win a job in the orchestra, I mean, you've got to win typically an international audition because they're very coveted spots. And so, but it's like getting into the NHL. Like you've got to work your way up, and you got to win the job, kind of thing. And
do you think the odds are similar to professional sports? To get a job like that?
I would say
it might be.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, for sure they're comparable. I don't know in terms
probably
of
more people who play the piano than there are. I mean, and the piano is like an easier, let's say it's the more widespread instrument, let's say.
Yeah.
But
there's only one in any orchestra.
But that's the other thing I was about to say.
Yeah, yeah, and then you have to and so when in order to get the when I won the Calgary job, there was several rounds, and then there were 6 of us invited to the finals. It was a national final kind of thing, and so I ended up winning that. But then for the OSM, there was 4 of us in the finals. But it's like you had to go through all the.
So there's like could have been like 300 applicants, and you got the one job.
Yeah. Wow. So it's like it's intense. It's very competitive, and but it's that way for all the players in the orchestra. Totally. And so you've got a really, really skilled group there, right? So we come together for the orchestra, and then my job is to. Now everybody can read the music. Everybody more or less knows how the music goes. Chances are they've played it before, and far more times than me. But not always. I mean, sometimes a piece can be new. But you can't have 70 or 80 opinions on how this thing is going to go. Yeah. So my job is to
consolidate those opinions.
Yeah, is to have a vision for what's going to happen, and then kind of gather everybody around a vision, make it happen quickly. We get to run through things once and fix a few problem spots, and then the next time we play this thing, there's 10,000 people there. So it's got to be right and quick. But so then that means though that we haven't had a whole lot of time to settle in to music, which makes it pretty exciting for us on stage, honestly. But everybody's attention is there, and that's one of the things I love about concerts is it's rare that you live that level of intensity. Yeah. Where it's like everybody is so focused on the present moment, and you're simultaneously focused on what you're doing right now, but I'm listening and I'm evaluating what just happened, because that tells me where things are going to go as well. Like I have to structure a musical phrase so that it's like architecture, like a bridge or whatever, but if the angle of a phrase takes off at a slightly different way than before, well, I've got to adjust where we're going to end up at the end of the phrase. So the notes
even
are
just
the
like
same.
the pitch, like, are you talking about like even the pacing or the pitch
Yes,
of something?
it's
so it's
not
like
the pitch, because the notes don't change, but what does change is where they're placed in time.
Okay.
Right. So
how long that note, if one note hit earlier than maybe it needed to or could have, and if the whole orchestra hit a little earlier than it needed to, then realistically, the pacing will kind of
adjust. Look at it this way: if you had, say, you were in theater or you were shooting a movie, and you've got two actors, they've got the same script.
Yes.
Right, and the words are not going to change, but depending on who the actors are, there's going to be a very different emotional contact delivered, right?
Yes.
But now, even with the same actors taking different takes, it's going to change. And so if one actor changes the emotion that he gives you, you're going to respond to that, and you need to respond to that organically, right? And so we'll be going, and somebody will do it to have a solo, and they'll do the solo a certain way, and then it's just like, okay, well, we're all listening, and we have to all adapt. And
that
so it's
kind of vibe.
Yeah. And so there's a like I am visually, the reason I'm there moving my arms is I mean, they can count without me. They know where they are without me. But what I'm doing, if you are seated at the back of one section, you can't hear what's going on at the back of another section, right? So you need, and sound only travels so fast. So if you're reacting only to sound, you're going to be late.
You're late or
whatever.
off time.
So then we have I'm a visual central reference for everybody. But so people are watching me, sometimes eyes fully up if it's an important transition, whatever, but often it's just in peripheral vision.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got a lot of notes to read, but they're also, they had to be really dialed into what's going on around them.
And they're reading the notes way more than I thought they would be.
Yeah, well, they see thousands of notes a week. Every week is a new program, right?
And so that I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's what I find is so interesting. I was like, no, I thought it was more like a stand-up routine. Where it's like you're doing the same set, like you know your punchlines. You're gonna tweak for if you're in Atlanta, if you're in Montreal, you say a different joke, you hit it a little bit different.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's adjustments, but this is like they're reading the music.
Yeah.
Way more than I thought.
Yeah. Because,
way more.
And plus, I mean, when you have an hour and a half. That's a
lot. That's a lot of notes.
And so yeah, and then every week it's a different hour and a half. So it's really impressive actually that those musicians can learn that many notes.
Oh, it's so impressive.
And they have a huge season, 44 weeks or something like that, of just at least one program a week. And then this stuff has to be not just played any old way, but like we're talking like world class, right? And
the other thing is that they cannot practice without all of you coming together.
Well, they
can practice their own piece,
yes,
of course, but they don't know how they you have to live adjust.
Yes.
Regardless of whether it's your first practice run on a set that you guys are going to do,
or
the live show. Yeah. There's a liveness to that.
Yeah. Oh, and then say, and if we do one concert more than, if we do a program more than once, so it repeats. But say we're on tour, each time you're in a different hall, the acoustic is different, and so it's going to change how you what's happening, right? So you adjust. Yeah, you're always adjusting on the fly, and we do respond to the energy from an audience too.
I believe that.
Like there's, especially in a concert hall, an outdoor concert is a different thing because it's just such a huge open space.
Totally,
and it's amplified anyway. So the audience is getting it through speakers. It's a different.
It's different. It's a different vibe. Yeah.
Whereas if you're in a Maison Symphonique where it's entirely acoustic, that's one of the things. Like a live concert, there's just nothing can replace that. You're sharing that experience with people. There's a big exchange of energy going on everywhere. In the audience and on stage, and it's a really cool thing.
I was impressed with the amplification that they had to do for the outdoor concert that I went to.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is I was like, they have to have mics all around. All these instruments have to be plugged in, and then you have to tweak them, and then even the electronic side of that is like, which one are you turning? At what level do you put each instrument?
Yeah, and that sound man, I mean, he doesn't get a sound check.
It's
straight live.
It's he's just live with many instruments, all of which could, like, one of them going off, one chord being like something. Like there's so many things that, like, obviously one violinist can be muted and it might make it's a huge difference for somebody who knows what they're listening to for.
Yeah.
It's for me when I'm like don't really know what's coming or what to expect or I don't know what the next note is. I don't know where the mistake is, right? Or I don't know where
Yeah.
the timing might have been this,
Yeah.
or something might have been a bit muted or whatever. But I'm still so impressed with the entire no, seriously, I'm so impressed. And I think that and a lot of the work that you and I have spoken about was the preparation that goes into that, as the individual that has to step up there and say, okay, like there's only so much I can do to prep, and now I have to transition from the nervous, anxious energy that you could bring to the table, and say, no, I have to state change to go into a completely different mind state, and say that regardless, I am leading this group of people, and they are needing me to be on cue and on pace.
So,
and you cannot lapse in
no, for sure. And while I don't make a sound in the physical sense, I do influence the sound a lot.
Yes.
And you can have the same group of players playing the same music, and you put different conductors on, and it'll sound
so different.
Yeah. So and then so it's it's an interesting thing where I do talk in rehearsal if there's something that I'm unable to change just through my gestures, whatever, then I do have to use words, whatever, depending which is more efficient.
Yep.
But in the concert itself, it's just purely physical communication, and which, some degree, like people, you see the hands waving, but a lot more happens with the eyes and just how you're breathing, how you're standing, in your presence, your energy, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very, very, very interesting. Well, I think it's noble and it's beautiful, and I love that you said, like, this is why we still have an orchestra, because I think it's so interesting to express, like, why haven't we gotten away from that and just gone full digital or whatever it is? And it's because there are certain things that are just irreplaceable.
Yeah, and
there's an energy and emotion.
How inefficient from a money standpoint a symphony orchestra is.
Oh, it has to be.
In the first violin section, you've got 16 players. In the second violin section, you have 14 players. So that's what, 30. Well, so let's just take one. 16. You have 16 people playing the same thing, and these are salaried union people. That it's friggin' expensive, and these are the best of the best that are going and doing the same thing, right? Like it just from a pure like cost
analysis,
it's like this is insanely
the economics
expensive.
Of a symphony orchestra.
It's insanely expensive.
Sound way horrible.
Yeah, it is very expensive to rehearse. It is very expensive to put on a concert.
And you guys have like replacements?
But
like, what happens if one of them is sick? Or what happens if one of them go in a car accident?
Yeah.
So you guys have like stand-ins that are ready to go?
There's
there's a certain delay, or
it depends. I mean, there is for every concert there are people that are on standby. They're typically at home. So hopefully whoever's going to get sick
will give us enough.
Enough notice. But what does happen though, if we're doing something like going on a tour, or if we're recording, something that like it's really, I mean, every concert is important, but this is really important. We will actually rehearse with more players than we need, because somebody's stepping in to replace somebody else. They haven't been there for the rehearsals.
Yes, so you have to actually rehearse there even more than the number of people.
Yes.
And how many people were in a given? It might change, I guess.
It changes a lot. Yeah.
But roughly how many people are normally in front of you?
About typically 80, 85.
Wow.
But like I just did a concert. I just did a concert 2 weeks ago with the OSM where we had choir, orchestra, and 10 singers. I had 138 musicians on stage that I was leading. So, there we had 2 rehearsals, but it was a lot of people to. It's a lot to organize. But it's a lot of prep time ahead of time anyway, and
So one of the things that I kept thinking, and this is a little bit of a tangent. It's the same topic, but it's a little bit of a tangent from the perspective of, I'm really glad that the orchestra, in a sense, hasn't been bastardized somehow through the world of marketing. And what I mean by that is as follows. Like, the whole time I was thinking, when you're watching the orchestra, almost, I would say at least 50% of the time, your attention is on the back of the conductor in a weird way. right? It's like I'm looking at
we look at what's moving too.
we're looking at what's moving, and everyone's moving,
yeah,
but I can't see the movement in the same way that I see the conductor moving.
The conductor
particularly when you're at lower down. I was sitting like right in front,
yeah,
right?
You couldn't see the whole orchestra.
So I can't really see the whole orchestra if I'm not sitting higher up, and so I don't really. So a lot of that attention is on the back of that conductor, and I was like, man, they could so easily put a logo there. You know what I mean? And I was like, and that would be worth so much. And at the same time, I was like, I'm so glad that that's like not a thing. You know what I mean? Like, I'm so glad that there's a sacredness essentially, and that's what I wanted to point out is that it feels like what you're participating in is there's some level of a sacredness to the way that it's conducted as a whole. You know, pun intended again.
Well, it's about the music for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess in the same way that you don't you don't go to an art gallery and place a sticker in the middle of a painting.
Yes.
You know, it's
just you would ruin it.
Yeah.
You would ruin it. The other thing I loved about what you said, and this is a large part of my philosophy in life, is that most of those people, if not, you know, almost all of them, came up through mentorship. That the way that you learn the piano, the way you learn the violin, the way you learn how to be any of these things, even being a conductor, even the role you were in, right, is kind of as an understudy of the person before you.
Yeah.
And there's some, again, sacredness to the way that knowledge is constantly transferred.
Yeah.
And there's no like YouTube way of going through it. Like there's no like cheap way of like bastardizing that.
Yeah. That's,
you know what I mean?
For sure.
Like,
it's a performance art, so there's no faking that. Like you are on stage, and the
just
sound
can't fake
you
it.
make is the sound you make.
Exactly.
And actually,
there's no auto tune. There's no like you hit that one note that one time, and then you came out with a best-selling CD that nobody knows that you can't ever hit that note, or that they tweaked a bunch of knobs to make it happen.
For the auditions to get into the orchestra, they are blind auditions, in that they set up a screen and you play behind. The screen, so they don't know what you look like. They don't know who you are. They don't know any of that. It's just strictly how good are you. That's it.
I love that.
Yeah.
How many people are at how many judges are on the other side of the blind audition?
There's typically something like eight.
Wow.
Something like that. Yeah. You'll have you'll have the principal players of whatever section this player is auditioning for, like the people who sit in front or are the main leaders. And then you'll have the conductor there, you'll have other members of the orchestra, and then you'll also have outside people who are just observing to make sure that the whole thing is fair. That there's it
is that intense.
Yeah.
It's like having an anti-doping industry, but in this case it's like, look, we're, just because that's Susie's cousin.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you can't, you can't screw around with that, because this is life. Like this is career making or breaking. This is like you're gonna go get a job as an accountant, or you're on the no, but really, like it's like that. It's that but it could be that real for someone who's trained their entire life. Like you said, they started at 5. They like went through painstaking amounts of I believe it. Of course, it has to happen. Right? Somebody's in, but for every person that's in, there's 3 or 4, 10 that are out, if not more, if not thousands.
100.
Yeah, exactly. Right? But the point is that what I'm trying to say is that like that's so fascinating. So talk to me about prepping, because I know that one of the things that you've come out with is kind of the Maestro method around prepping and being kind of a better human being under pressure, a better human being in life in so many different ways. I know that's a big passion of yours in so many different categories of life. But I think, and I kind of echoed this to you when we spoke about it. I'm like, you have such a unique position that you can talk to with expertise how to deal with pressure, how to deal with different situations and prepare for those different pieces. So I'd love to know, and I'm sure that people who are listening to this would love to know, what does your prep look like? Like, how did you change state so powerfully, right? And because it's more than just you went to read a Tony Robbins book and you're like, oh, state change, and then you were able to do it. I think that you would obviously practice that in some way, shape, or form in so many different aspects of your life. Just talk to me a little bit about the prep that goes into your
I would say
work.
The main thing, especially in a job like this where you can't practice it until you're there. So visualizing is so huge. The degree of clarity you have in your mind about what you want to have happen, what you see happening, and how you prepare through your visualization is huge. Huge. So when I'm preparing, I've got the music in front of me. I'm the only person in there that has everybody's part, because each musician has their individual line, right? That they're going to be playing in a section or whatever. But You've got
the full sheet of music.
Thing. But so then I'm looking at the music, and I have to visualize what it's going to sound like. I have to visualize who's coming in when. But so I'm seeing this, but then I have to play the movie in my head.
And you're also visualizing like, oh, the violins were a little bit more this way or that way.
Yeah, well, because I'm going to have to be able to give them direction as to what I want. Because you can play, the music can say play something loud, but I mean loud how, right? There's so many shades of that.
Yes.
It's not just a decibel level.
No.
It's relative, but then it's like, is it angry loud?
Exactly. Is it proud loud? Is it angry loud? Yeah,
these are all different, you know. So there's so many different ways that this could go, right? And so I have to anticipate what information they're going to need from me, and I have to have total clarity on what this is about for me. That's my job, is to have that clarity, right? So visualization, and you know, there's studies done on practicing like basketball free throws, right? And so they took 3 groups, and you know, and there was one that didn't practice at all. There was one that practiced a ton. There was one that only visualized, and apparently the one that visualized had the biggest
increase.
Biggest increase, because really, you know, it's our conscious mind is what sets the target, right? And so we've got this massively powerful subconscious mind that will figure out how to get whatever result, but we've got to know what the result is that we're after. Right?
And your conscious mind in the visualization is informing what really is happening in this entire concert is flow state.
Yeah.
It's many levels of flow state that are kind of merging into one.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
like you said, it's like I'm reading the music, but I'm also seeing the baton waving. If I'm a musician, right? And so all these different like things are happening, and you're not. It's like you know, I would equate to when I'm playing sports. I was playing soccer, so that's the sport I played the most, right?
Yeah.
I'm seeing the play, but I'm not always like, it's not like I'm seeing the play with my eyes necessarily. I'm feeling the play, and then I'm like moving into the right position, and I'm flowing into those different pieces, and I'm flowing into the small nuances that somehow our brain is calculating.
Yeah,
that like the arc of the ball or the arc of this thing, and that and again, soccer is a visual sport, meaning I'm adjusting but to visuals.
Yeah.
And so what I can say to that is, and with visuals, we have a lot more language. So I can be like, oh, get it higher, get it lower, get it this, get it that, kick it this way, spin it that way, right? There's all these things that I can use to color it, essentially.
Yeah.
But I find it seemingly, and maybe I'm wrong in this, it seems harder to color sound. Like, it seems harder, like let's say, okay, so you're in your practice, right? You're in one of the kind of the rehearsals, and one of the group of 16 violinists, like that whole group is just off somehow.
Yeah.
How do you commute? Like what are you supposed to? How do you express that? You know what I mean? Like I find it seems to be to me, I guess. And again, I don't have the experience. This is why I'm not in this job position. But expressing that seems more difficult than it would be to express something
subtle,
visual.
Yeah. It's more subtle, but it's also we naturally put a lot more emphasis on our visual sense,
Yes.
right? So somebody who's blind, I mean, they've got, like say Daredevil, right? They do a great job in that thing. Is a superpower. It's like he's got this sort of like 3D view of the world through his hearing, right? So you just become attuned to it. And that's what we as musicians, I mean, we spend a lot of time refining our ability to listen.
Yeah.
Right? There's a difference between hearing something and listening to something.
Fully.
Right? And so
I love that you said that.
So we're listening with intention. And so if somebody in the group, now I might not, from where I am, and especially when everything is going on, I might not be able to pick out what player.
No.
Right, out of the 16,
Sure.
right away anyway. If then I lend my focus to it,
then you'll figure it out.
Then you can figure it out. But
Are you seeing it visually sometimes too? Like you're seeing like this the way that they're.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. You can
To some degree,
you can,
there's a visual piece to it.
There can be, or their face.
Because they know. Yeah, that's better. That's even better. You're seeing an emotional cue.
or their neighbor's face.
Yeah. Like the stare over, like. That's so true. There's there's a social component to it as well in that way. Of course, there has to be.
Yeah. And so, but you're saying like, what is it? How do you identify what's going on? Well, a pitch can be a little too high or too low. Now, too high compared to what? Well, compared to what everybody else is doing, right? So,
so the baseline, I guess, is the now that just happened. You're comparing it to that exact. It's almost like you're adjusting, but to that exact moment, rather than adjusting to like a more arbitrary thing.
Yes.
You're adjusting to. Well, that's how it sounded here, but you were a little bit more this way or more that way. So you're adjusting, like almost like live to just very recent present live.
Yes,
yeah.
So there is the higher and the lower thing, but then there's also the articulation. So if you speak in a more articulate way versus a smoother, when everything is kind of rounded out way, well, we spend a lot of time making sure that we have unity around that. That's something we call legato versus staccato versus. So this is to a degree indicated in the music, but then we're also working on
But there are lots of terminology that kind of color and can explain those different forms of.
So that's really what we're working on when we're rehearsing. Is making sure that we all are on the same page as to how long and
how it could sound, what it should sound like as a group, and what it could, what your kind of, and the individual musician is kind of taking that in and then saying, okay, well, this is how I'm going to have to adjust to that.
Yes.
And then based on what their neighbor did, the first time they made the adjustment, maybe their neighbor adjusted a slightly different way.
Yes.
But over time, they're finding
that's one of the really fun things about, especially in orchestra, the OSM's level. You can go through something once, and there will be some mistakes or whatever. You go through it a second time, and it is already like on a whole other level. Because everybody has taken in and absorbed whatever information they needed, and they figured out quickly how to put it together, which you don't get at a lower level.
Are they often sitting next to the same person?
Often.
The way that they're arranged is physically
some
similar.
sections are always next to the same people.
Okay.
But like in the string players, there is a rotation, so you're not always at the back. You do get rotated towards. I mean, there's leaders that's their role is to lead, but then
I could identify particular leaders.
Yeah.
I saw that there was leaders to different sections.
Yeah.
That became obvious to me.
There's
a hierarchy
within the orchestra. So there's me conducting, but then the concertmaster, who's the violinist sitting immediately to my left, is the leader of the orchestra from the player standpoint.
Yes.
And so then you have the front row of string players sitting in a U shape around the podium, and they are all locked into each other, and then everybody sitting behind them is locked into the front players. So
interesting.
So if you are playing in the middle of a section, you see what the conductor does, but this is also why it's just periphery, because you need to react to what the conductor does, but then you have to play at the same time as your section.
The pace right in front of you.
Because if you respond at a different speed to what the conductor does, then the rest of your
section. So the leaders have to be visually in front, because that also sets the tone for the stroke.
So there is a physical component to how they lead, because you have to see
when the bow is going to move. Are there any blind players?
In a symphony orchestra, not that I'm aware.
Very rare.
Because how do you? They would have to memorize the music. So they just from a pure practical standpoint, they couldn't learn the music every week, right? Now you could absolutely have a blind player who's got a piece memorized play in an orchestra.
But not for the whole concert or the whole show or the whole tour. They're playing a specific piece. They're doing the solo. They're doing certain pieces.
Because you need the visual cues from the conductor. Yeah. So, but there, I think there are people working on technologies to translate a conductor's gestures into a type of sound, like that they could have an earpiece in and respond to movement of the conductor. But then how are they listening to that and the other thing at the same time? I don't know. Or maybe a vibration.
It'll never be the same as obviously if you have all your senses intact. But interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, that's
Yeah, it's so cool. I don't know why I'm so fascinated by it, but I truly am genuinely fascinated by it, and it's not because we're on a podcast or anything. It's like I really, I was really fascinated by the way that it coordinated, and then the lack of knowledge that I had. So I was like, oh, what can I pick out? Like, what can I? just experiencing this,
Yeah.
beyond just the experience of the sound and then the emotion that it evoked, the fact that I can remember, like, oh, that does come from that, or
Yeah.
or I can see, or I can like hear a movie that clearly had taken inspiration from something,
Yeah.
right? There was other
Yeah,
things
yeah.
I was coming out
Yeah.
with.
Well, I had a similar, like I grew up in a small town. There was you couldn't even learn the violin in that town. So I was taking piano lessons as a kid. I wasn't that into it. I was more into sports. I was more into whatever. I was a typical kid. And then it was once, well, as a teenager, I kind of stumbled upon the world of really high level classical music or art music, right? And it just kind of opened up. And as teenagers, all the emotional turmoil you're going through, whatever, and it just was like, holy, this. I felt.
But did you have like a dad that would like constantly play it on the
No,
the
not
record
at all.
player or anything
Not
like
at
that?
all.
Like,
No, actually.
you stumbled into it and you
I
thought
s-
that was awesome.
I was literally, I was
Like
painting.
how many teenagers are like classical music?
Yeah.
That's what I like.
Right, and I wasn't either. But then I was painting the deck one summer and listening to Nirvana, and like I grew up
Nice.
on Guns
Also,
N' Roses,
loved
Metallica,
Nirvana, loved Guns N' Roses.
U2. I like, and I was a little bit tired of the pessimism. I was getting just a little bit like, it was just like a drag all the time. You
Yeah.
know? And I just kind of had this feeling like I just wanted to try something else. And my parents had just been given a CD player. So this would have been in like 95, 96.
Early, yeah.
Yeah. And so CDs have been around for a while this way, but my parents didn't have one, whatever. So some friends of ours had given them a CD player and had just given them a few CDs to get them started. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna check out what these CDs that were given. And so and one of them, it was on the cover, there was like this, you could see it was a concert hall, and there's this piano and a tiny piano because the picture was taken from far away. And so I was like, okay, well, I put it in, and it just blew my mind. Like I could not believe, I was into athletics, so I could not believe the speed that this pianist could play. And then I was reading up, it was Horowitz in Moscow, and Horowitz, when he played this concert, he was like 82 years old or something. And so I was like, how is this possible?
That this guy's
How is this possible
moving
that
that
can play
fast?
that fast? So I just instantly was hooked on like the sheer skill of being able to coordinate something like that from a physical standpoint. So, I wasn't really able to appreciate the subtleties of the music per se, but I was just impressed by the ability, the virtuosity. Yeah. So I was blown away. So instantly got interested by that. And I was, my job at the time after schools, I was a clerk in the library. So I was shelving books, whatever. Well, I had access to the tapes and CDs and whatever in the library. And so I would and nobody was getting out classical stuff. So I could take it out for months at a time.
Yeah.
And I lived out of town, so it was quite a commute. And so I was listening constantly, and I just got so
you had
into
a
it.
long commute, so you had long times to listen.
And I would listen over
Because you had to
and
physically,
over
because you
and
can't
over
watch
and
things
over.
while you're commuting as much.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah,
so
yeah.
you entered into the world where people listen to podcasts, and this is
Yeah.
why podcasts are so popular, right? But
Yeah.
the idea of, so you had this long commute, you have all these things, you get introduced to it, and then boom.
And so then that's how I got into, but that was piano, and that was, so, and then
So
when
you picked
I
up the
was-
piano at what age? When is the first time you started playing?
I started piano lessons when I was 7.
Okay.
So my mother put me in lessons.
I think
but
I did something similar.
I
only did it for a
really-
few years,
Yeah,
but- or
well,
two-
that's
2
just
or
it.
3
And
years.
I every year tried to get out of it.
Yeah, I was the same.
And
I
it
was like, no, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because this is an old lady that comes and I have to play, and I'm like, I felt like, I don't know, I felt like a pawn in something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah.
And I was happy about it, and I'm sad that I don't know it now.
Well, and that's
I'll
the
say
kind of
that.
common thing. So my mother felt that way too.
Yeah.
She wanted me to be able to play when I was older. And
Yes,
so-
because
and it was one of
she
these
had
things-
had that same experience
Yeah.
and said, I wish I knew how to play.
And so, but the thing was, like, once you start the year, you don't quit. You finish that year. If you don't want to go back the year after, that's your
fine.
deal. But
you
you
start.
finish what you started. So I would get through, and then by the time the summer was over, and she asked,
You're
"Do
like,
you want to do it again?" I'm like, "Okay," but I was like, "But I don't want to do any of the exams. I didn't want any
Yeah.
stress. I didn't want any." I was
Yeah.
like, "Okay, fine, I'll do." And it was like each year we'd have a piano festival in the spring, and I'd hear the kid who was 1 year older than me playing pieces that were a bit faster than what I was doing. And I was like, oh, I want to get to that little bit faster thing. So just by hearing somebody who was just ahead of where I was, like not
perfect.
impossibly ahead,
Yeah.
but just ahead, I was like, I would go home and I would try to learn what I just heard, right? And so I had that kind of, and then, but I had no idea when I heard that CD, I had no idea what was out there in terms of what was possible. So then I was totally hooked on that. And then when I was about 16, the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra, because I grew up outside of Hinton, which is near Jasper, Western Alberta, in the Rockies.
Yep.
Nearest city was Edmonton, 3-hour drive. The Edmonton Symphony did an outreach concert. So that's a big undertaking to ship a symphony orchestra 3 hours to go play in a friggin' movie theater in my town. But so here they are. You could only fit 200 people in this theater or whatever, right? And you got 60 or 80 people on stage, and you get 200 in the hall. But anyway, and this was the first time I saw a live symphony orchestra. I had no idea that grown men and women could play the violin for a living. It blew my mind. I thought you had to be a doctor, lawyer, fireman, teacher, whatever.
The things that you learn in school, the traditional path.
And then I was like, man, these people, they're adults and they're making music and that's their job. And I was like, that's so fucking cool. Like, holy cow, it just changed everything. Like, I just thought, man, like, just blew open my paradigms. And I didn't know what I wanted to do at university. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what I was heading into grade 12 and I was kind of lost, and I wasn't, I knew I didn't like school. I didn't like high school. I didn't want to go and do a harder version of high school and university just until I figured out what I was going to do. Like, I was really not. And then when I thought, I just want to take a year off and learn about music. Like, just take some piano lessons. I want to learn about history. I want to learn about theory. I was just curious about it. And it was something that, and my mother was worried that if I didn't go to school, I wouldn't go at all, ever. Mm-hmm. And so she's like, why don't you go to university and do it? Well, I didn't even know you could study music at university. I had no idea. So, I looked into it. Sure enough, you could. There was an audition coming up. And so I, for the first time in my life, practiced.
Like full on.
Practiced full on. One Sunday, it was in January, and I practiced 4 hours, and I got tendonitis.
Oh.
Like, because I had no technique. I had not built up to being able to play.
You didn't have that muscle.
And I was doing a ton of things wrong, and just didn't. So then I couldn't practice, and then it was like, anyway, all this. But I ended up I was hell bent on it, and the audition was one of the most stressful things I'd ever done. But I ended up getting in, and then I thought, man, like, I just felt like the luckiest guy around. I thought, like, I can't complain about anything because I get to do for the next 4 years for this bachelor degree. I get to do music every day. And I'm like, after that, I'll get serious. I'll get a real job. I'll go to law school or something or whatever. But you
still dedicated 4 years to it in your mind, though.
Yeah. And the thing was, being from a small town and not having started practicing seriously until I'm 18.
That's
was
huge. You're like a decade late.
Yes. And I was way behind, and it was so intimidating. It was so scary. But I was just hell bent on improving, and I worked and I worked and I worked and I worked, and I made a lot of progress, and it was hard, but
when did it come to you that you're like, the conductor is my role?
Well,
like, when did you go from, because when you went into music, you were starting to learn, okay, so you're going to learn theory, you're going to learn how to read music, you're going to learn about other musicians and their positions and different things, but you were always going through that with the lens of piano?
Yeah,
were you keeping the lens of piano the whole time?
Well, when the Edmonton Symphony came, I saw the conductor and I was like, that looks pretty awesome, right? But
it didn't hit you at that moment.
Well, not per se. I mean, and it's such a stretch to go from like never having heard an orchestra to going like,
I want to be that guy.
Right? There's a certain naivete to that. That's just like, you just go like, hey, that looks awesome, right? And to not know how impossible something is a huge advantage. Like, me being so naive from a small town, like, and not having any competition around me, not knowing how ridiculous of an ambition it was, I just went for it, right? Like, you just go, and you don't.
And you didn't know the odds. You didn't know there's only like X number of them that are actually employed and make a living, all those things.
Yeah, and so and that took me to eventually conducting the Montreal Symphony Orchestra, which is the top orchestra in the country, and it's just like but the whole time it was just kind of this desire to learn and get better. But
is there like an actual class in university that's about being a conductor?
Yeah. You can. Yeah.
So did you end up mastering in that in the end? Did you end up like switching over to that?
No. Eventually, but I went as far as I could with the piano first, because I was like, there's no way I can get in front of a high level group if I don't have a high level myself. As
musician. So it's like a respect thing too. Well, a hierarchy. It's like almost a little bit of a hierarchy.
Yeah, but also like what would I have to add? Like what would I be doing there? right? Like, you know, you don't, like the NHL, you're not going to go in there and get on the team and not be at the level that everybody else is, right? Like, you just, so I knew I wanted to be a conductor from early on, but I knew I wasn't ready either. So I stayed in piano a long time. I did 12 years at university. So I did a doctorate degree.
I did not know that.
And so I did my bachelor's, and I did a master's degree, artist diploma, and then my doctorate. And
all in piano.
in piano.
Wow.
Yeah. And you know, when I toured nationally, I played in France, Japan, played with the dance company. I did
How
all
often do you
sorts
play the
of,
piano now?
Not often enough. Actually, there was a few years
Damn it,
where
I wish I
hardly
could
played at all.
roll out a piano right now. Just shut up.
Yeah, no, but I've gotten back to it recently because I miss it. But,
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, my 20s were spent in a practice room. Like, I was practicing
endlessly
4 to 6 hours a day, which takes.
See, I did the same in entrepreneurship.
Okay, yeah, but so you just do that so much.
So much, yeah.
But then, so I came to a time where it was just like I needed something else. That I needed to. And then when I was finishing up my doctorate, I'd finished the coursework and I just had recitals left to play. I just had the practical side, doing the concerts. So then I went to the Conservatory in Montreal to study conducting, and that was a 3-year super intense program focused on conducting. So there were conducting classes. This is a very long answer to your.
No, this is what I know. This is what I want to
conducting
know.
classes, which interestingly, with our teacher, we conducted in silence. To anybody from the outside, it would look friggin' ridiculous. But we were conducting in silence because his idea was, you're not reacting to sound, you are initiating sound. You are
the maker of sound.
Maker of sound. So if I want to understand everything that you want,
fucking brilliant.
Based on, you know, so it has a side that is brilliant. It has a very impractical side though, because when you do get in front of an orchestra, you don't know what the hell is going on, because the sound, there's a delay. You give a downbeat, or if you practice to a recording, you can conduct along to something. And there's an instant, like, you're
but that seems
following
easier to me.
Oh yeah, it's totally. It's not the,
because I'm following the count. I'm following this is where it's going to go, and I know where the beat is going to be.
You do this, and the sound happens right there. But it's not that way. You do this, and there's a delay because there's just a reaction.
A reaction, yeah.
You know, like if you've ever said a joke, and then there's this like delay before people laugh, but there's a moment where you're wondering, like, did
it get through?
Yeah, and then it's just people need to.
It's not that huge of a delay, but it's a delay nonetheless.
It's long enough for you to wonder though. Sometimes
it's long enough to think.
Yeah, it's long enough to think.
It's long enough to think.
But so when you're conducting, there's constantly any signal you give, there's a delay, and so you have to eventually you learn to anticipate the delay.
Yes.
Right. So to make things
so
happen.
You're almost reading. You're reading the music, and you're actually hearing the music before it's actually playing.
Yes. Yes.
In your mind, when you're conducting, you're reading the music sheet, and you are actually hearing the way you want it to sound, the way it's probably going to sound, and you're hearing it. I think.
You have
in
to
your
hear
mind, you're really
first.
hearing it.
Yes, you have to, because you have to hear first in order to indicate physically.
And then you're also adjusting based on what you actually physically.
What is happening right now? You have to be in the present moment, and you're reacting to what just happened. So you're kind of in 3 time zones at the same time, and it's busy. Like there's a lot going on. Yeah. But it also forces present moment, and so this is one of the things about, you'd asked a while ago about how to prepare for intense situations. The thing is, when people get up to speak in front of somebody, or suddenly you're put on the spot or whatever, you become we call it self-conscious, right?
Yep.
You become hyper-conscious of yourself and of the moment. And we don't practice that. Because when we're constantly, I mean, especially now, we're distracted so much of the time, but to just be hyper-aware of now, in and of itself, is something we don't typically do enough of. But when you're under pressure and your brain starts going faster and your adrenaline is flowing, you are really aware of the present moment.
Totally.
And so you need to, if you're gonna withstand pressure, that's a big part of it, is getting ready for being able to do what you got to do now, right? And practicing now, like really being able to deliver what you got to do now. And if you can do it on your own, in your room, you will be able to do it in front of a crowd. But people say, "Oh, I fall apart when I get in front of an audience."
No,
not really.
That means
you didn't have the same degree of
fortitude.
intensity. Yeah, you didn't have the same degree of intensity when you were preparing.
I agree.
Right, and so if you repeat it enough,
so many people undervalue practice.
Yes. Oh yeah, and like, I mean, and pop culture plays into this thing, like
Yes.
movies all the time. It's just like, oh, band play something, and then just like it's just like the most amazing thing just happens, and we have this sort of think that it should be easy.
Yes.
But it's like you repeat and you repeat and you repeat and you repeat and you repeat. And like comedians that we see, you know, they've been doing this for the same show for years or whatever before it ever hits a camera.
And the timing,
Netflix,
the timing.
you know?
Like people forget about the like. What's funny is not just what was said, the timing and the way that it was said, the pacing, the expression of the comedian, like da 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 da, da and the way that they move their arm, or all these things, everything plays into that.
Yeah, and you're not going to put somebody into a primetime show who. There's no risk that you know, it's just like
not preparing,
nobody wants that. The performer doesn't want that.
No.
The audience doesn't want that. The people who have invested in don't want that. So it's just people underestimate how much it takes to
do anything.
Yeah.
To be a master.
Yeah. Yes.
To be a master.
And why so few people master things, right? You see the end result and you go, that'd be amazing.
Yes.
But you got to keep that end result in mind while you're going through all the shit to get there.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really the.
I've grown an appreciation for what you're doing, and I've started to kind of really think about how it plays into my career, and even just like so normally, so this is the first time I've ever run a podcast or actually just before this my brother also ran it when I did one with him, but it's the first time I'm not running the podcast.
Okay.
While it's happening.
Okay.
What I mean by that is I ran the coming together of all the equipment. I ran together how this works and what we connect to and all the different things. I see how this is all functioning. Everything is under control through my vision of what was going to happen, right? And then many times of me like screwing up this, changing the tweak that thing. Oh, this might happen. Oh yeah, this is a little thing, detail, all these different pieces. And then while I would speak to people, I used to press the actual button, meaning the camera would switch to me, it would switch to you, and all of that was happening, but I was still running it. And I've learned that the mastery, like what it took me to get here, is I started my podcast in 2013. This is the 5th season. Okay, of my podcast. I've been very inconsistent with it. In moments, I was super consistent with it. And I was like, but it's always been from day one a video podcast. Because I know that is the level of mastery I want to have with it. I don't want it to just be one way or another way. I've always wanted the audio to be really good. I don't know anything about audio, but I'm starting to learn how to like move all the different parts and realize that each and every one of them, if I can master the detail of the part, then I can master the detail of the greater vision. And I think so many of us focus on we're either too micro or too macro. And I'm more prone to being too macro than I am to being too micro. I'm more of like the move quick, break a bunch of stuff, 80-20, all that stuff. And I think for the most part, given people's startup scenarios or when I'm helping people, even when we were talking about like you're building your course and doing certain things, I'm like 80-20, we have to 80-20 it here. Because particularly when money's involved, there's speed. And mastery doesn't lend well to speed. It's actually the antithesis of speed. It's mastery is slow. It is a process. It is learned through mentorship. It is learned through all these different things. And the only way through speed in that scenario that says you're, as an entrepreneur, you're going to like hit cash flow positive in some way, shape, or form, is that you find somebody who's walked that path before you. And I think it's super crucial.
Which was why, working with you as a coach, that was amazing. Because you've been there, and so you could just help me fast track.
Exactly. I just know the bullshit, right? And it's what Superhero Academy is about. It's what all those different pieces. But the idea of now, like, I feel like I'm entering more of the realm that I believe you've spent a lot of time in, which is like the mastering of the micro pieces of things and all those little details and like your knowledge of all those different pieces. And it's not even that how much I know about you or how much we've interacted. It's actually just I can sense that. I can sense that you spent 12 years in school studying something before ever really going out and saying like, this is my job and this is what I do. You know what I mean? It's like, for me, I was the exact opposite. I started university, but my first business was the day, like they happened simultaneously. I actually got my first business in entrepreneurship. I was an entrepreneur before I ever had a job. Do you get what I mean? Like, in a sense, I've been an entrepreneur forever. So I don't know what it was like to not be in the pressure of cash flow. See, the difference with my pressure is it's not people, And it is people now. Like,
Yeah.
you know, this is a live podcast, literally. This is live streamed to, you know, people with 7-second delay or whatever it is.
Good
but the
to
point
know.
is, yeah. But and it's recorded and blah blah blah. But the point is, good to hear, right? But what I mean by that is the element of the pressure that I had to deal with was it was a very short feedback loop, but it was a very real one, which is financial.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And then some other consequences that emanate from that center. But there's something about me learning now the micro of each and every knob. Like, okay,
Yeah. You're refining now, right?
I'm in a refinement stage.
Yeah.
And so for my 20s, from 18 to let's say, you know, 29 or 30, I was in that same 12-year phase of learning.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was like, why not Gary Vee? Why not, no. You know, like, and part of me had that thought. And the other part of me, which I'm lucky with and I'm endowed with, is my vision of long-term thinking, which is my greatness doesn't have to come now.
Yeah.
And my greatness actually isn't measured in a dollar or cent amount. It's not measured. It's measured in how am I showing up for every one of these different pieces.
Right. Yeah.
And over the last year, I've been profoundly moved by my realization that not everyone is like me. In the sense that, like, I'm a kinesthetic person.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I'm a feel kind of person. So how things feel to me is what dictates how I move. But many people are visual people, auditory people, audio visual people, which all have different layers of complexity.
Yeah.
And I would go as far as saying that some people are you know, have even other. I think there's even more than what those four categories blend to, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
But all that to say is that I'm starting to notice the nuances. And I think that the work that you do and the way that a conductor has to conduct themselves and conduct the orchestra is in the nuance.
Yeah.
It is nuanced to its core. And it is tapping into flow state, but then all the things that get you to flow state changes, visualization, things that you mentioned.
Yeah.
All of those things are techniques that are phenomenal for creating the proper environment for something beautiful to transpire.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for me, like, the last 8 months, you know, I'm many entrepreneurs and many people who I work with, they're like, well, you have the whole podcast set up, but like, why aren't you doing more then? I'm like, no, but I don't. I don't have it all tweaked in. I don't have all the nuances just yet dialed.
Yeah.
And only now, 8 months later, and really 7 years later almost, because I started in 2013, right? 6-7 years later, do I really feel like I'm like, yes, it's dialed.
Oh,
like
wow.
it's at a point where I'm happy with it. And it's not about like how many people are watching or any other thing. I don't care. Like that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because this is me mastering the art of something. Yeah. And treating it like an art.
Yeah.
And not just a job or an outcome.
To that point, in anything that is art, there's no end to the learning.
Exactly.
There's no end to the adjusting. There's no end to, which is why we keep doing it too. Right?
Exactly.
Like
it fuels me every time. It's just like, yes, I can tweak this thing and get it a little bit better that way, or maybe next time I'll try this way. And it's the kind of art, and this is what I like about the podcast and the live podcast world specifically, is it's a kind of art that I can only practice live. And that is also not normally how marketing works, for example.
Right.
In some ways it is, right? I have to make the ad and I have no idea how it's going to perform. Yeah. All of it is conjecture until the second it goes out, and the algorithms, the magic of the algorithms potentially tell me whether or not I was a genius or an idiot. But the idea is that, and part of that is not all in my control, and that's a really weird thing to do. But at the end of the day, there's still like lots of prep, lots of planning, there's lots of things that I can do that kind of adjust it in a particular way. But there's something that you cannot fake about being live, because there's no I can't cut something here. I can later, and I can remove it, I can tear it down, I could stop it from being live in a minute. It's not a problem in that way. But there's still something about showing up, because now my level of preparedness and a level of practice that I have to bring to this live art and to the art says that I have to be prepared. And I appreciate that. And I don't know that most people get that opportunity, because I think most people have a job where their job is a small piece of a much larger thing, but they're not particularly in that live moment, right? They're not particularly like, they're not Elon Musk on the stage like rolling out the truck and getting the exact feedback that comes that says the Cybertruck either looks great or looks ugly. They're not in the live moment where they throw the ball at the thing and his window shatters and he's like, and his instant reaction is, oh my fucking God. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and he's like, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, there's just something about that is so real and so powerful.
Yeah. So there's, and you just hit on something there with Elon Musk where I think it's like there's the whole preparation thing.
Yeah.
But then live, you don't know.
Exactly.
Right. And as a leader or as a whatever, like people want certainty. They want to know that you know where you're going.
Yes.
Because you don't want to follow somebody who doesn't know where they're going.
Of course.
But at the same time, you can't relate to somebody who isn't vulnerable
Yes.
at the same time, right? So treading this line between
Vulnerability.
absolutely certain,
Yeah.
but also being open, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, like, and as you're developing your thing, you got to be sure that the thing is going to work in order to do it. But you also have to be open and curious to how it might change or how it can be improved. And we need to be able to be confident to deliver while also knowing that we're not at our ultimate best, because tomorrow we're going to be better than we are today.
Exactly.
Right? So it's this kind of, it's this tightrope walk of trying to push ourselves without being too depressed about where we aren't, while not sitting on our laurels about what we've accomplished or whatever, right? And you're just constantly, so you never really arrive, but you're always, you know, you have to be satisfied enough to keep going, but
satisfied enough, but unsatisfied enough to keep going too, right? Because it's a balance of both.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've done about an hour and something. What are we, an hour and 15?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
My pleasure,
for coming by. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you so much for being a master, for essentially taking the time to be a master, and for also in your own mind being like, yeah, and I'm still not one, and, right? Like, you know what I mean? In your own mind saying, yes, and I could go further, and I think that's the beauty of anybody who's chosen to do art for a living, in my opinion, has made a decision that they're on that tightrope. And I think you said it very beautifully, is that they're on that tightrope and that they have to accept that tightrope at this point. And the doubt is the thing that destroys the tightrope. It's like the thing that makes you fall.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have doubt.
Yeah.
You're going to experience doubt. You're going to experience the wobble.
And it's healthy.
And it's healthy and it's important because it keeps you back to why the focus is so powerful.
Yeah.
And I saw that on display, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you, and I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate the art that you bring to the world.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Likewise.
you. Yeah.
Likewise, dude.
So anything you want to share with anybody who's listening like that, anywhere they could find you, anywhere they can, there's, of course, all of you know, in the show notes, all these different pieces, any links to you on Facebook or anything like that, anything you want to.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I'm always happy to connect with people on Facebook, and just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Keep it simple like that. Yeah.
Show notes. Click like. If you got all the way here, you know you were fascinated, which means that you get the opportunity to click that like button, to click that share, to subscribe, to leave a comment, to let us know what you thought about any of these different pieces. And we'll see you in the next episode.